Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today from Germany is Dr. Michael Gerharz. Michael helps leaders across the globe find the right words so they can make a bigger impact. He's the author of The Path to Strategic Impact, The Aha Effect, and the Leaders Light the Path Manifesto. His blog on the art of communicating has more than 1,000 published posts, and he's the host of the Irresistible Communication Podcast, and I am truly pleased that he's here with me today. Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to see you, John.
Great to see you. As I like to say, Michael, let's dive in. Michael, let me ask you this. Someone walks up to you and asks you, what is your definition or perspective on leadership? What would you say to them?
I'd say that great leaders light the path. They find words that unite a team behind a common vision, that show us the path, but then they trust the team with knowing, being able, and most of all, being willing to figure out how to best walk it. So they know how to tap into the brilliance of everyone on the team rather than commanding them what to do next.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that if you look at, as I call the big three, the second one of the big three is that people want to be involved in the decision-making processes of the organization. They just don't want to be there. In fact, I myself have walked away from the term followers. I don't consider the current skilled talent pool to be followers. Collaborators, partners, yeah. I think we have to see that in terms of a significant difference in terms of how we bring people into the process. So I would agree with you there. Michael, you speak of leadership communication as the ability to bridge the gap from ambition to progress. Can you unwrap that idea a bit more and explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's actually my day-to-day, right? And probably a lot of the day-to-day experiences for a lot of your listeners too, that you've been to those meetings rooms where it really sounds like a great idea in the boardroom and everyone in the room agrees, and you find those spectacularly ambitious and probably also fancy sounding ideas and visions and missions and strategies. But then when you communicate it to the team, you'll often experience that it doesn't make as much sense for them as it did for us in the boardroom. They somehow don't even get the point. They don't, or at least they don't fully embrace it. And so a lot of the potential of what was clear to us when we were in the moment and like ideas were floating and we were pushing us higher and higher, a lot of that energy has gone away when we try to use that same language with the team. And so we somehow need to bridge that gap, because in the end, It's them who need to implement it. It's them who need to act on those choices and who need to make their more specific choices to actually make the ideas work that we dreamt up in that meeting.
I agree. I think I've always speak about the fact that humans are a why-driven species, WHY. And if you can't come back, as you say, to the team and express to them the whys of why things are and why things need to proceed in a certain way, rather than just saying, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, I think you're missing a great deal of the motivational power, if you will, of being able to have people join you, to be part of it.
I'd even go a step further here, right? So that's certainly helpful if you can manage to get them to understand your why behind it. But what we even more powerful if you could find like the shared why. So in what way does their personal why align with our business why? And so not get them to build our dreams, but help them build the shared dream.
When I just talking a few minutes ago about the big three, the number one is values alignment, that people are searching for a level of values alignment with the organization. And that goes beyond just values to something more about their own future. Okay, I'm aligned with this organization, and I'm betting my future with this organization, at least for the period of time that I'm here. And I want to see that there's progress in my life and that we're going to arrive at a good place together. So I absolutely agree. You can't just, the days of telling people, Simon says do this, Simon says do that, and have everybody jump aboard and do it. Those days are over.
Yeah.
People are not working for a paycheck anymore.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people, I've been fortunate, the guests that I've had, I've been blessed with people in conversations from around the world. And it's the same. It's everybody, whether it's India, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Spain, the UK, everybody has rediscovered the meaning of things in their lives. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely agree with you. Any reflection on that?
What I actually think is a pity is that still a lot of the literature and the advice that you hear on communication doesn't really realize that reality, right? It's still largely about how to persuade harder. So there's new psychological hack that we haven't tried yet, or there's rhetoric device that we can use to really persuade harder, when it's all about resonating stronger with what matters to the team. Because what's really changed is that they have an alternative today. It's not like back in the days where there's been that big, huge company in your neighborhood, and that was basically the only place where you could get meaningful work. But that's not the reality anymore. We can get work all across the globe, right? And so we have a choice as an employee. And if you can't manage to resonate with what matters to them, they will make use of that choice.
And I want to follow up with something you said, and something that I got from the pre-workup before we got here today. And this idea, and I'd like you to go down the road on this a bit, this idea between persuasion and resonance. Mm-hmm. I think that's it's such a wonderful observation. So could you unwrap that a bit more, if you will?
Yeah. So if you look around, then we're living in a world that's getting louder by the day. And where it looks like people feel the need to, that the only way to compete in that world is to crank up their volume too, to get louder, to get even better at writing those attractive hook lines that hook you in, or that you need to spend even more energy in persuading the people of your take. When in fact, we're also living in a time where that overwhelms a lot of people, where they just simply tune out, where they have a choice to just not pay attention to you if you're just shouting your messages with your take and your perspective at them. And that you might have much better chances if you just cared for, not so much for using the megaphone to announce your take and your perspective on the world, but first of all, listen to their conversations and ask a question before you start talking, so that you don't have to shout as loud and so often to convince them of your way of looking at the world, but can just use their language and speak to their problems and their struggles and their aspirations, so that you can resonate with them rather than having to persuade them.
It's brilliantly stated. I have been doing some speaking in the last year. And one of the exercises I give to the people in the audience is something called a shared values recruiting exercise. And I was at one conference, and a gentleman asked me the question. I said, well, normally, he said, when people come in, I tell them about the company, and I tell them about the benefits, and I tell them about this, and I tell them about that. I said, why? Why are you doing that? Yeah. I said, the question is, why are they sitting in your office? What attracted them? And what I do in the shared values thing is to say, make no judgments about anybody. Open the door. Here's a little exercise you can do, because you want to find out about them. You want to know about them, what motivates them, what they care about, what's in their heart. Something and I look at motivation, the greatest motivation force on the planet is meaning. What gives them meaning in life? Yeah. And I think if you do that, before you start trying to sell the company or the benefits or anything, let's find out who they are. So I absolutely agree with you. You have to use two of these, right? And one of these in that proportion, as they say. Exactly. Keep your ears open and listen and invite them into the process. Invite them so that you get to know them rather than, as you say, using the megaphone as a sales job. Go ahead, take it.
Yeah, I think what could help to make that switch is to realize that so a lot of those times, it feels like the company's doing it like you just described. They are looking at themselves as the heroes of the show, right? So we're the heroes. We must get the audience to appreciate our brilliance and lead them to applaud us for taking on that burden of being the hero. But that's not why they show up, right? Because the thing is, they already got a hero, and it's themselves, right? They are the heroes of their own lives. And if you just show up as the person who helps them become a better hero of their lives, I bet that they'll listen so much closer to what you've got to say rather than when you are the one who shows up competing for that role of the hero.
The analogy or metaphor that I use is Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And this is what I've been saying, and I think I can't even begin to tell you how happy I am to hear you say that. We have, as you well know, over the course of the last 60 or 70 years, when it comes to leadership training, have created or have worked to create a generation of Jedi Knights. The leaders of the organization will come down, brandish their light sword, and vanquish the problems and issues that face your organization. That may happen every once in a while. And what I'm saying now is that people have to understand that leaders of today have to be more like Yoda. That in fact, they are the teachers, the facilitators, the ones who create the opportunities for people to, as you say, become their own Jedi Knight, become their own hero. That is really what people want to do. They want to be involved in making meaning in their lives and become their own heroes. And I think it's a good way of making people understand this is the changing dynamic. This is how much things have changed. And if you can see yourself as a leader of an organization, as the Yoda, creating a generation of Jedi Knights that are going to vanquish the problems and issues that lie before the organization, now you're, in a sense, keyed into where you're going and where this organization needs to go in terms of training, in terms of strategy. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I think that's, for me, it's the simplest way of getting the point across. Any reflection on that?
I think you couldn't be more right there. And that, well, the one thing that I would add to that is that the ingredient that tips the game in the end is trust, right? That we'd actually trust them to use the power and to use their lightsabers. Because so often what happens is when we use or hear that term empowerment, is that's just a nice way of saying, I trust you with making decisions as long as those decisions are the same as I would have made, right? But that's not really what empowerment is, right? Because that means that we're going to give you the tools. We're going to teach you how to become the best Jedi Knight that you can ever be. But then we trust you with living up to the challenge. And that includes that you might come to conclusions that are different than my own conclusions. And when that happens, we might have a good chance of having a discussion about that. Or we might just live with yours and look what happens. Because, well, just think about it. What if that's actually a better choice? We will never find out if we don't give you that trust.
Absolutely. Trust, to me, is the fuel that runs the engine of any organization. It runs every relationship. Without trust, you have no relationship. And it's a myth if you don't have trust. Let's talk about empowerment. I've been on this bent for a bit. When we talk about empowerment, you well know, just as you so wonderfully described, it is always this, if you look it up in the dictionary, there's another term that is similar to it. I think there's two terms. One is delegation. Right? Delegation is empowerment. The other one is permission. I use the term permission as well. My permission, okay. We've been talking about delegation for 50 years. And the knock against delegation has always been, just as you said, we delegate the responsibility without delegating the authority to carry out the responsibility. That's always been the knock against it, as you well know. And we never talk about the other side, the hidden side of empowerment. So take, for example, a person that maybe has a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree or even 20 years of experience, 10, 15 years of experience, a bachelor's, a master's degree in a particular discipline. Isn't it true, if we use delegation, the word delegation, to denote transference or direction, isn't it true that the person delegates the power of their background, experience, and education to the organization? Don't they send it the other way? And we call that, the word for it is subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is when I send my power to the organization. And the person who, in my mind, so beautifully explained this was the English management thinker Charles Handy, who was considered by many to be Drucker's equivalent in Europe. And Charles Handy, I'm going to say something, I'm going to catch a lot of grief for it. But here's a quote from Charles Handy. Empowerment is inherently a contradictory idea. If power can be bestowed, it can also be taken away. It represents, at best, it represents benevolence, at worst, manipulation. Mm-hmm. To me, that makes you take a step back. But the problem with empowerment as it exists right now is it's become a mega word. It's a mega word. You can't get on LinkedIn. You can't look across the horizon of management and leadership articles without seeing empowerment blasted, as you say, from the giant megaphone, without people understanding that there's something more to this. Be careful. Be careful about what you're talking about. Yeah. And just as you say, too often in empowerment, a person will do so much, run back to the boss and say, Hey, I did this. Can I do that now? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You can do that. And so you do a certain more, and then you run back to the boss. I did that. Can I do this? And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's the authority and the responsibility and the trust, just as you said, to say, go ahead, run with it. You got it. And I'll back you up all the way. Make a mistake, we'll fix it. No problem. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Once again, how often have we said that in the conversation already? I couldn't agree more with that, right? That there is that can just as well become a vicious circle as it can be a virtuous circle. And when it's just a word that we picked up on LinkedIn or in that latest workshop we've been to and don't really mean it, it actually becomes that vicious cycle of that it actually might scare the hell out of our team to actually make a choice and to actually decide when the boss says, yeah, here, I delegate that task to you. Because, well, we always wonder, so is that really what he wants me to decide here? Is that really what I should be deciding here? And so that creates that hesitancy that really holds us back, rather than the other way around, where we really mean and live up to the trust that we delegate, but also that we receive, and that we really make use of and confidently then make those choices, knowing that we have our leaders back, that they fully trust us with making those choices, knowing that we are allowed to make mistakes or at least arrive at different conclusions than they do. And that way we can actually move ahead way quicker and forward rather than hold us back as in the other case.
And release the energy of the people in the group.
Yeah.
Get them involved, fully involved. So absolutely. Let's talk about strategic impact. I know this is important. You speak of the four-path principles. Can you tell me what they are? And can you give me more detail about how they should work together?
Yeah. First of all, what I've observed in my work is that the reason that a lot of strategic efforts fail is not because the strategy would be bad. It's actually often a really smart thing. The books have been written. That is something that's well known, and that every kind of senior manager has a lot of background in that. They know how to craft a great strategy. And there's a lot of support out there. You can hire consultants that will help you out. And still, so many of those efforts fail. And they fail badly. And very often, in my experience, that has to do with the way that they are communicated. That they are either those fancy sounding mission statements that a marketing agency was paid to come up with, and that sound great, but no one knows what they actually mean. Or it's the opposite, that it's the kind of consultant speak that sounds super professional and we know what we're doing. But again, the team can't make any sense of it. Or it might be that huge dump of PowerPoint slides where we go through every single detail and somehow on slide 216, we find the answer to our problem. And I think that there must be a better way. And actually, I think we're seeing it with a lot of businesses that have a bigger strategic impact and things that seem to work with my clients too. And I've tried to boil them down to that nice acronym PATH, which has the great double meaning of strategy is all about the path we're on and making progress and in the best case, even leaps on that path. And it stands for those four basic fundamental principles that I think can help make a difference here. And P is plain and simple. Can you find words that your team understands, that they know what they actually mean for their everyday lives? Then A is actionable. Do those words have a translation for them? Do they know how to put those words into action, what they mean for the everyday choices they have to make when they set up that new project, when the customer rings, when they have to negotiate with a partner or something like that? So is it actionable? T, is it transformative? Do we get further ahead than just the average and the usual choices and playing by the rules? But do we encourage, by the way we communicate our ideas, to make those bolder moves, to really make a leap. And then H, heartfelt, which kind of is the thing that glues all of that together. Heartfelt, so can we find words that the team and we believe in, truly believe in, about the things that we deeply care about, so that we can align their personal goals with the business's goals, so that we can fully trust them to make choices in the best interests, not only for themselves, but also for the business. So those 4 principles, plain and simple, actionable, transformative, and heartfelt, are like, so I treat them as a checklist, right? So if you check your communication against those, is it plain and simple? Is it actionable? Is it transformative? And is it heartfelt, something that we truly believe in? Then I believe, and my experience seems to prove that, you're going to have much better chances of really making an impact.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. Because people have to understand where they're going and how they're going to get there. And boy, I tell you, for a long time, I'll be very honest about it. I've talked about this before. I shied away about talking about mission statements because I got sick and tired of it. You have one? Oh yeah, it's on the wall. You guys breathe it, live it, do it every day? No, it's just on the wall. Pardon my sarcasm, I refer to them as the roulette wheel mission statements. A roulette wheel where the numbers spin and you spin the ball. And next to the roulette wheel is the betting table. And people come in and want to put money on every number on the wheel. You're going to lose a lot of money. Yeah, you got a guaranteed winner, but you're going to lose a lot of money. And it goes on and on. I said, look, you got one sentence. The way I'm expressing this these days is through the movie 300 with Gerard Butler. I said, now they had a slogan. The slogan is, this is Sparta. Anybody have any confusion about this? Does anybody not know who we are? Okay, good. That's the slogan. And certainly a mission statement would be maybe one sentence. For example, our job is to meet the enemy and destroy them. That's what we do. That's what we do here in Sparta. And everybody, not only outside, but everybody inside Sparta understands what we do and how we do it. I absolutely agree with you. And I'm back on it with great fervor. And the reason I am is this. I talked about values alignment as I did a little earlier in my talk with you. But if the company itself is not aligned with its own values or doesn't bespeak its values clearly and succinctly, how can you expect to bring people in and mate them up? It's like building a bridge from one side of the river. You got to build a bridge from both sides of the river, and they got to meet in the middle. So that to me is very important. And I'll just go one more point. I'm a big believer, and I've created a process, a strategic thinking process versus a strategic planning process. And the reason is, in strategic planning, which is normally decided by the senior members of the organization, right? The CEO and the vice presidents. Yeah, you may be fixing things, but they may be the wrong things. If you don't do strategic thinking, with strategic planning, you're looking to answer questions. Strategic thinking, you're making sure you're asking yourself the right questions. Because if you're not, the halls of business are lined with the carcasses of companies that never took the time to ask themselves the right questions. You know this. You've seen it. It's global. It's everywhere. Companies, billion-dollar companies, gone. A whisper. And because no one ever said, maybe we should really take a hard look at what we are. One of the other metaphors I use is restoring an old house. You got to strip those walls back. You got to get all the paint and the wallpaper off and go down to that level and then start to figure out what's really the problem here. So I'd love to get your reflection on that as well.
Well, so often strategy is considered to be that thing that upper management does, right? And if you look at some of the literature, it still feels like a lot of it is heavily romanticized still, in the sense that we think of strategy as that brilliant plan that the brilliant strategic thinker thinks up in his office. And then We just have to do that to execute it. But that's just not how things work in real life. Any business of more than a handful of people, let alone those huge conglomerates that we have, they aren't steered by a handful of boardroom resolutions. Their fate is decided by the millions of tiny choices that happen throughout the organization each and every day. And so, to speak to your point, I couldn't agree more that the much more powerful approach, rather than to think up that brilliant plan that we hope will solve every problem and defeat the competition in one fell swoop, we should help our team become those strategic thinkers. We should, to reuse that term, empower them to make those choices and align those tiny choices so that they match as closely as possible the path that we're on. And so those choices together then will make the leap, rather than hoping that they understand what we thought of in the boardroom and that they can make sense of that.
And the things that blindside an organization or the senior leaders oftentimes is hidden in the recesses of the structure of an organization, especially a bureaucratic organization, right? I can give you three reasons why. Number one is people don't want to tell the boss bad news. So you never find out about that thing that could really hurt the organization. Number two, prideful work. I had a situation a few weeks ago where I was working with a company in strategic thinking exercise where we took a horizontal and vertical cross-section of the company. And this person wanted to solve the problem so bad. He's a good guy, working hard, but he didn't want to pass the problem up to anybody. I can fix it. I can do it. I don't need anybody to fix it here. I'll do it. We found out he just didn't have enough horsepower. He didn't have access to the regional manager, which the president of the company did. The president of the company got on the phone, fixed the problem in 5 minutes. It went away. He said to me, I wish I could have fixed it. I said, you fixed it. You brought it, you put it on the table. We took a power resource, happened to be the president of the company, and we applied it to the problem. It's fixed. It's done. And the third thing, and here's the big one, politics in the workplace. People striving for a position that may not want anybody to know the secret that they have or the problem that they have. They want to be seen in the most positive of lights all the time and feel as though if they voice something, and a lot of that depends on the upper structure, maybe you're not praised for bringing the problems up. I know one particular leader never wanted to hear, I don't want to hear bad news. That's your job, is bad news. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. So these are the things that get trapped into the structure, as I like to say, into the bureaucracy many times that don't get voiced. And these are the things that eventually blindside the senior leaders in the organizations because it never got air. It never saw the light of day. I'd love to hear your reflection on that.
So much time is wasted on trying to be right when all that matters is getting it right. And I think that that's the root cause of a lot of the things that you just mentioned, that shying away from teaching the bad news or from that trying to appear in the best light, that stems from a culture that's built on trying to be right, where we defend our positions much more than fostering a culture where we're open to hear the other side. And what so often happens in those discussions is that we ask ourselves, so what's wrong with them, right? That they get to that conclusion, that they avoid the risk of expanding to that other country. When the actual question we should be asking would be something like, so how can a person that's as smart as them get to that conclusion? So what makes them come to that conclusion? Where does that come from? Because we might find out that they actually have a point, and it actually makes sense when we just care to look from their perspective. And once we achieve that, we can switch to looking for the common ground there, to where's the path ahead, rather than whose path is right, find the common path.
I agree. Absolutely. I have a question I've been dying to ask you. Here we go. There is this idea that you seemingly disagree with, and you hear about leaders go first and eat last. You seem to disagree with that notion or the way that's expressed. I'd love to hear why you disagree with that.
I don't necessarily disagree with that idea or the idea behind it, but the conclusions that are often drawn from it.
Okay.
And so the way that I see it interpreted way too often is that it's taken to mean that the leader is the one who's got to have all the answers, who knows what the right choice is in any given situation, who needs to be the one who has to make the call on the spot. And I think that just limits the impact that you could have. Because as Scott Kelly, the former ISS commander-in-chief, just beautifully put it, the smartest person is usually the person in the room who knows how to tap into the brilliance of every person in the room. And so that means that it's not the leader who's got to have all the answers. It's much more, their job is much more to be the one who's willing to figure it out, to not give in until we found a meaningful solution, to really find a solution that we all together can get behind. And so to get it right eventually, rather than being the one who has the answers right away, being the one who motivates and inspires everyone to not let go of the problem until we found something that we truly believe in.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the Jedi Knight versus Yoda perspective in some respects. Is creating where I like to say the simplest, creating an environment where people come to do their best work every day, where everybody's part of the solution. When I was a naval officer, I worked for an admiral, later became an admiral. He used to have this one great line, and he used to say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think we want to bring more people into helping find the solutions, the right solution, not just any solution, and people who have their nose against the problem usually know more about the problem than you do. It just makes a lot of common sense. I'll ask you my last question since we're close to the end. And my favorite question is, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it at a problem or an issue of the world, the work world what is that problem and why did you choose that?
I'd actually pick something that we already spoke about because,
okay.
And I'd say let's phrase it a little differently. So one of my favorite books is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, with the famous conclusion that, so sorry to spoil that if you haven't read it, but it might not be a secret. So with the famous conclusion that 42 happens to be the answer to the ultimate question about the universe, life, and everything. Which, of course, as the people learn about that question, totally enrages them, right? So how outrageous is that 42 would be the answer to the ultimate question about life, universe, and all the rest? The only problem is, which they slowly get to realize, that no one ever stopped to bother asking, so wait a second, what actually is the question? So what are we actually trying to answer here? Even more than 42 years after its publication, I think that's just such a timely message, that we're living in a time that's obsessed with having answers and opinions on basically everything and not taking enough time on asking, so wait a second, what are we actually trying to achieve here? What's the question actually? And so to circle that back to your question, so if I had a magic wand, I would use it to inspire people to ask more questions rather than give answers.
Great answer. Now, what is the problem? What is the question, really? Because, as I said before, that And as you said, we rely on the senior leaders of an organization to answer the right questions, to ask and answer the right questions. And oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes they miss it. It may not be their fault per se. It may just be it gets by them because they really are not looking into the deep heart of the organization and, if you will, the heart of the people. So I absolutely agree. Michael, this has been a delight. I truly appreciate your time here today on the podcast. I wish you all the success in the future. I'm sorry I'm not in Germany so we could sit at one of those great pastry places and have coffee and a pastry. But that's the way it goes sometimes. Thank you so very much for your time here today. I appreciate it. I wish you all the best in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, John, for having me. It's been a pleasure.